did you do that? How did you do that?
Welcome back everyone to another ESO build video. Today I'm going to show you the easy mode Sorcerer update for the Horns of the Reach DLC. Now this has been a very popular build for the channel and amongst a lot of newer players as well. Also some more experienced players, because this is capable of doing all content. Easy stuff for normal dungeons and all the rest of it if you're not too experienced with it. Vet dungeons, no problem at all. Maelstrom and Vet Maelstrom with or without the Maelstrom weapon. And of course all of the end game trial stuff, even hard modes and vet modes, all that kind of stuff. This is capable of everything, and it's very easy to use. So the point behind this build is of course to take full advantage of the Sorc's major passives, which is its ability to dish out damage with lightning. But of course you need to be able to buff yourself, sustain, pump out a decent amount of damage all at the same time, and this does it without the need to spend loads and loads of money on expensive potions. You don't actually need any. Now, of course, the DPS itself is very high, but it is based around taking full advantage of off balance, as it has been since the original build in January. Basically, if you're solo, you will get a good amount of damage. It will be very strong. But if you have more than one of these, or even more than just one more, you bounce off each other and boost each other's chances to get off balance. Therefore, your damage goes up a lot more before you even receive trial buffs. So I'm going to explain how this all works. I'm going to put it all together, and then I'll give you a quick demonstration as well. So first of all, we are going to go into the skills. I'll explain these. If you want to skip this, that's fine, but these are very important, and I do explain in detail why they are there. First of all, we have Inner Light, which is a major skilled skill. You can use it in PvP to decloak things, and you can use it alongside the major skilled passives to empower single target hits, not dots and all the rest of it. However, we don't use it for that. We use it for the max magic and the crit bonus. This applies for just being on the bar, so make sure you have that on there. Also, we use Shock Clench, which is Destructive Clench, I believe, but it's the lightning version. And this basically does a decent amount of damage when it first hits. It stuns, it does splash damage, and then after that it does a damage over time shock ability, which lasts 8 seconds. So it's pretty good. And also, we'll get to the status effects and all the rest of it, but this boosts status effects quite a lot. Hardened Ward is your main shield. Very simple. It shields your health bar. You can see it covers my health. Use that when you're in trouble, when you're taking damage, when you're about to take damage. If you have to block a boss, maybe the boss is on you, shield up, hold that block. You'll take a lot less damage. And that is, let's see if we can buff this up, a 20k shield, 20.6 in fact. Really strong. And because our sustain is really high, we can actually use that a lot more often than most other setups. Bound Aegis, we keep this on us all the time. It gives us a small resist buff, but above all it gives us 8% max magicka to our pool, which is pretty nuts. So keep that on. You do have to double bar it. It's on both bars, otherwise it will just turn itself off. But basically, you activate it, stays on forever unless you die or turn it off. Very simple. Mage's Wrath, this is our main execute. Basically, any enemy that is below 20% health, you hit them with this, and it will do a massive amount of shock damage. However, there is a little trick to this. If you apply it to the target just before it hits 20%, as long as it hits 20% health within 4 seconds, it will explode. Doing the same amount of damage as it usually does, but you can preempt it. You can kind of put it on the target before it's ready to go. And then it does splash damage as well on the initial impact. Suppression Field. This is your oh shit button, basically. Instead of the ulti that's on the back bar, you use this. All enemies inside of this will be stunned for 8 seconds, and you will do damage over time to all of them as well. Very handy if you're in trouble, especially in dungeon situations where you're getting overwhelmed, there's nothing you can do, your back bar ulti isn't quite ready yet, fire it off, everything's good. It's actually for 12 seconds, sorry, not 8, and because this is fully morphed. But it's 0.5 seconds for the damage over time, which is pretty nice. Back bar, this is important. Bound Aegis again, already went over that. You have to double bar it, otherwise it falls off. Blockade of Storms, this is a morph of Wall of Elements, and this is called Blockade of Storms because I'm using a lightning staff on the back bar. It's very simple. Goes on the ground. Make sure your enemies are inside this when you're doing your DPS. I'll explain that in a rotation in a moment. This is crucial. Lasts for 8 seconds, make sure it stays down as long as possible. Boundless Storms, this gives us a really big resist buff, major ward and major resolve. It also grants you faster run speed for 7.5 seconds, so for getting around it's quite good. But above all, this also does a decent amount of shock damage every 1 second for 23 seconds. So this here, every second you're pulsing with lightning damage, which hits anyone nearby. This is important for 2 reasons, not only because of the, well, 3 reasons in fact. Not only because it does damage, but because you can heal off it, which I'm now going to show you, and also this can execute people as well, or enemies or whatever, and I'll show you that in the passives in a moment. This is the one that goes alongside of it. It goes along everything else as well, of course, but it's really important for this. Whenever you do crit damage, you heal once a second, including from this. So if you're standing at a bunch of enemies and you're on zap, 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 and you get a crit, this will heal you. Plus this also gives you major sorcery, increasing your spell and weapon damage, which is awesome for 33 seconds. This must be up all the time, otherwise you won't heal from your crits. This needs to be up as much as possible so that you get the resist bonus and you can do close quarter damage and heal from it. And of course execute, which I'm coming to, like I said, in the passives in a moment. Liquid Lightning. This goes along with our Wall of Elements. You need both of these down together. But it's very simple. You place it wherever you want to place it. And it does damage over time to all enemies in the area. Lightning damage, I might add. Thunderous Rage. This is our Destruction Staff Ultimate. You morph it to Rage because this one can actually be placed just like this can. Just like Liquid Lightning can. You can place it wherever you want. The other morph to it does less damage and sticks to you, so you run around like the Terminator with it stuck to your body. But that's primarily for PvP. This lasts 9 seconds and deals a shit ton of shock damage every second, and again is lightning damage. Now, why is this all important? Let's get to some passive first. What do we got? Reduces the cost of magicka and stamina abilities. This is crucial. That one's not quite so important, although it does affect you if you throw down a negate bubble. This makes your negate bubble last longer. And this, if you cast a negate bubble at any point in time, you'll gain crit, and so will your friends. So anyone next to you would also benefit from this bonus. But we don't use it that often, so it's not essential. What do we got here? Don't worry about that one, because that's for a pet. We'll get to pets later. 15% reduction to ultimate cost, you definitely need that. And increases your health and stamina recovery for 20% while you have a Daedric summoning ability slotted. We have 2. This one and this one. So we get the 20% bonus to recovery there. That is going to help because you will be blocking and you need your stamina up. This increases health when you have a pet active. Again, we'll get to pets later. Where are we? This is really, really important. Increases magicka recovery over 10%. Increases your physical and shock damage by 5%. That's crucial, the shock damage part. And this is the execute I was talking about. Any enemies that are under 15% health have a 6% chance per lightning tick or any lightning damage that you do to do that amount of damage. It says 10k there, but it'll be more. I think it goes up to like 20 something once it crits and all the rest of it. Yeah, it's 10k at the moment, but that'll do a standard somewhere between 17 and 25, maybe even higher, depending on your buffs. It's ridiculous. So basically, every tick of this has a chance to disintegrate nearby enemies if they're low health. Every tick of this also does the same. So does this. So does your execute, which is your Mage's Wrath on the front bar. So does your destructive clench, and so does your light and heavy attacks. Every single lightning ability you use, every single tick of damage has a 6% chance to do that crazy execute damage if the targets are low health. Very, very important, and that is why we stack as much lightning damage as possible. On top of that, you increase the weapon and spell damage for each sorcerer ability slotted. It says here we have 8%, and we do. Because this is 1, 2, 3, and so is this, 4. It's very important that we increase our spell damage because we're heavy attacking a lot. This is built around that, and your spell damage directly affects your heavy attacks and your light attacks. It does affect your spells and your abilities a little bit, but it primarily boosts the crap out of your actual weapon attacks, which are your primary attacks, by the way. You get taught this when you start the game. Tutorial, light attack, heavy attack. They both do damage. One of them gives you recovery back or resources back. You should be making use of them. Not spamming abilities over and over and over and over and run out of juice. You're supposed to use your primary attacks and pace your skills in between while keeping up your buffs. And that's exactly what we're going to do with the rotation as well. Let's get a few more passives out of the way so you understand exactly where I'm going with it. Destro staff, this is very, very important. You must get these. Right, this is a separate issue. We'll talk about that in a minute. Try focus. You want to make sure that your shock heavy attacks do splash damage. 129% increased damage actually to the enemies besides. So if I zap this pillar here, there's a skeleton right beside it. This damage will splash onto him and onto his friend, onto his friend, and they'll all get damaged at once by me just doing a heavy attack. The splash damage is insane. Usually inside that kind of distance, this distance here, and that. So that's AoE, so is that, and so is the splash damage. Now, what's important is also, is it on here? No, your destruction staff abilities ignore 10% of the enemy's spell resistance, which is insane. Increase your chance to apply burning, concussion, and chilled status effects by 100% while your Destro staff is equipped. What that means is, say for example, we have lightning on the floor. Lightning can affect the enemy with concussion. This will give them minor vulnerability, meaning you do 8% extra damage to them, which is quite nice. If that status effect works, and it does straight away from Wall of Elements. Now, if you double up on concussion, it turns into off balance. Off balance will increase your heavy attack damage by 70%. So that's crucial. Now what we need to do for that is to make sure we get as much damage as possible. We need as much off balance as possible. So that's with all the lightning abilities. Now, where are we? We need to go to this part here. This is very, very important. A lightning staff being equipped has to be equipped, but you have to have a skill on the bar as well. Your area of effect damage is increased by a further 8%. But you must have a Destro skill on your bar, hence why we have Destructive Clench or Shock Clench right here. That one is contributing to our overall damage, so for having it on the bar, we have 8% AoE damage. Same on the back bar, we have a Destro skill there, we have 8% extra on the back bar as well. This is all calculating up together to smoothly iron everything out. Light armor passives, I'm not going to go into these in too much detail, but make sure you get every single one of them. They increase your recovery, the reduction to cost of spells, increases your spell resistance, and of course crit and penetration. Very, very important. Make sure you don't need all of these. I've got them for another build, but above all, make sure you get Juggernaut, because we are wearing one piece of heavy gear, and we want to make sure we get that extra 2% max health. Very, very important. The rest of these ones you can get if you want. They're minor bonuses, but if you want them, get them, but leave these two alone because they're for 5 pieces of heavy and we're not wearing 5 heavy. Vampire, crucial stuff. 10% max magicka recovery, 10% magicka recovery and 10% stamina recovery across the board for being stage 2 or above, and of course undeaf for being stage 3 or above. I'm always a stage 4 without fail. Reduces the damage taken by up to 33% based on your missing health or under 50%. This means that the lower your health, the less damage you take. You actually get quite tanky when you're low health, which is of course essential because in an oh shit moment you don't want to die, you want to go quite low and get someone to heal you, or heal yourself, whichever. So it's really, really strong. And of course this one, stage 4, you sneak faster, full speed in fact. I use that one for PvP or for stealing stuff, whatever. Not champion points, we haven't finished with the skills yet. Fighters Guild. You can switch to this, I'll explain that in a moment. But if you do, you want to make sure you have Intimidating Presence, not just for quests, but because it makes your Fighters Guild's ability cost 15% less. This one is very important. You generate 9 ultimate whenever you kill Undead, Daedra, or Werewolf, and you will kill those all the time in this game. So make sure you get this passive above all others. You don't really need the others. This is weapon damage, which is useless to you because we use spell damage, but this is essential. Get that. Mage's Guild, very, very important. I don't actually use this, so you can choose to take it if you want, but I don't. Where are we? Get all these passives, of course. They increase the duration of Mage's Guild abilities if you're using them, reduces their cost and all the rest of it, but above all, the one you want is this. This increases your maximum magicka and magicka recovery by 2% for each Mage's Guild slotted. We have one on the front bar, so we have an extra 2% on top of the 5% that this gives us. So we're actually getting 7% magicka from this item or this skill being slotted, plus a 2% recovery as well. So it's really, really important. You can slot this as well if you prefer. This is a choice. You can slot this here, Ice Comet or Shooting Star, entirely up to you. I don't actually fire it if I have it on the bar. I just have it on the bar for the extra 2%, both magicka and recovery. However, because most of our damage is being done via heavy attacks, we want the spell damage from the SORC passives instead, because that will actually boost our heavy attacks a lot more than this will, because this won't actually affect it at all. This will only affect our skills. What else have we got? Undaunted, crucial stuff. Max this out ASAP. You need to get this because if you take synergies, you get resources back. Very, very important. You need to get this because we're in 2 different types of armor, heavy and light. And for doing so, we get 2% of all resources, max health, max stamina, max magicka, for each piece. So we're using 2, we get 4%. So 4% there for your max health, magicka and stam. We're getting 8% max magicka here, 7% for this being on the bar. And of course, because we've got 1 heavy, we are still getting, of course, another 2% max health as well. So you can see all those tiny little percentages start to add up. What else have we got? Nothing there. Siege shield, you will need this for Sanctum or Fidia. That's another story. I'm sure your raid leaders will explain that to you. But if not, basically, you get a magicka bomb on you. And if you don't dump your magic really quick, you're going to die. You need this on your back bar at least. Spam the hell out of it. Get rid of your magic if the bomb is on you. This is very hard to run out of magic with, so you're going to need it. But that's for later. And of course, we are a high elf, so we want all of these passives. 9% max magicka recovery, 10% max magic, and of course, all the damage you do with flame, frost, or shock, which we're doing a shit ton of shock damage, gets boosted by 4%. Now, this is a choice that you can make depending on your experience. Personally, I don't actually need it because I'm using trash pots all the time anyway. But max this out as soon as possible. There is a video on my channel for alchemy, how to level it up in about 15 minutes flat. The idea is not to max this out so you can make potions, but it's so you can max this out. Medicinal use at level 3 will increase your potion by 30%. Meaning, if you're using a crafted potion, it will actually last 47 seconds. The cooldown is 45. So if you're using potions all the time, you can keep up whatever bonuses you get from them potions 100% of the time, as long as you press it every time the cooldown is finished. So it's a very important skill line. I would recommend getting it, although I don't actually use it myself on this particular character. That's entirely up to you. Now, choices. First of all, you don't have to use this. If you're in a trial or dungeon situation and you have a stupid amount of off balance, as we usually do in our own trials because we have 4 of these sorks running, exactly the same, you don't necessarily need the shock clench because you've got a good status uptime on off balance. So you can, if you're close in the face, switch to beast trap. But although this will increase your damage because it increases your crit damage by 10%, which is very important, the rotation's exactly the same. You put this in place of destructive clench, you use it exactly the same time. It's no complications there. But if you have this on here, we just lost the Destro skill bar on our bar. So you swap this out. So we have 1 Destro skill on here, meaning we still get our AoE bonus. Now we do lose a 2% spell damage, but we gain 10% crit. That is entirely up to you. On the back bar, you then put a gate bubble there instead. But for ease of use, and it's honestly a lot easier, keep destructive clench on here, keep negate bubble there, you're good. Other choices, you can swap this in certain trials and dungeons for crushing shock. Now this is so you can interrupt the target. Basically, if they're going to cast something, you've got the red sparks coming out the middle of them, flashing, hit them with this ability, crushing shock, and you'll interrupt them from a very long range. Does a little bit of damage, it's not too bad, but above all, it will interrupt them, and of course it sets them off balance as well, so your team gets initial damage on them. But that's only in certain situations. The rest of the time, keep this on. Now, the final one, and this is if you decide to use a pet, this is entirely up to you, and the reason this is a choice is because some enemies cannot go off balance. There are 3 types, I don't know if there's any more. 1 is a spider daedra, 2 is a storm atronach, which is the big stone guys, and 3 is anything that resembles a lich. They look exactly the same, they're always the same model. You get them from dolmens occasionally, and Crypto Hearts, there's 1 in there, and also the Architect in Vaults of Madness. Anything that looks exactly like that cannot go off balance. In those situations, of course, you're not going to benefit from the status effect bonuses as such. So what you do is you take this off and replace it with a volatile familiar. You do have to double bar it, so put it in the same place as this. And what you will get from that is a little bit extra damage where you just lost out for not having the ability to knock stuff off balance. This doesn't necessarily do more damage overall for the build, but it does in those situations. And all you do is activate it once every 8 seconds to let him do his AoE burst damage. Now, we'll get rid of that because I hate him. He's also handy in Maelstrom if you're not experienced enough in it to know where everything spawns, because he can run over and grab aggro before you do, which is quite funny sometimes, although he can be a bit annoying. So, I'm going to go over to the stats real quick before I show you the gear. There's a couple choices for this as well, but we'll go into it. Basically, whoops, what do we got here? How have I activated my skills? And put my potion on. There we go. 43k max magic, 16.8k max health, 971 recovery, 2.8k spell damage, which goes up. I'll show you that in the gear. 60.1% crit and decent resist across the board. 64 points into max magicka. We're using the Thief Munderstone and Vampire Stage 4. Now, it's very important that you hit that 60% because that's kind of a sweet spot for magicka. Anything much lower than that, you're going to struggle. Previously, in the last patch, this actual setup was 65% almost. But now we lost a little because the Thief got reduced and a few other traits got reduced in the game as well. But this is still absolutely fine. Did a lot of testing with this. I barely noticed any difference at all. Well, if any, it's really, really good. Now, the extra spell damage comes from this. See the 2.8 there. And we have a weapon and spell damage glyph on here. Now, this is 5 Spider Cultist, which you have the staff, I'll get to that in a second, in any order, and 5 Netch's Touch. Yes, my armor's almost broken. Now, Netch's Touch will give us spell crit, max magic, spell damage, and then it will contribute almost 400 spell damage to everything that we do that is lightning damage or shock damage. Surprise, surprise. Shock, shock, more shock damage. So is this. So is this one, the heavy attack. So is this ability, and so is our execute, and so is our ultimate. So every single thing we do has an additional 400 spell damage applied to it. That's point 1. Point 2 is the the Spider Cultist has exactly the same stats, crit, max magic, and spell damage, but we gain an additional 440 spell damage to our destruction staff abilities. Now, this is worded slightly wrong, or slightly misleading, but I'm going to explain how it works. These skills here, our main skills, this one is affected. Wall of Elements is affected. Our ultimate is affected, and above all, our light and our heavy attacks, our main attack is also affected. So with those two sets combined, all of our abilities are boosted either by shock or destro or both. Some of them are boosted by both, especially the heavy attack, which is increased by 840 spell damage across the two sets. Then we increase it furthermore with this glyph. Then we increase it even more by using one heavy Molekina shoulder, which gives us another 129 as well. So you can see where I'm going with this. We have a lot of flat spell damage boosting our lightning and destruction staff abilities and light and heavy attacks combined. It's very, very balanced across all of our abilities. Now, so just to recap over that, 5 Netch's Touch, 5 Spider Cultist, 1 Molekina. Make sure this is heavy. Get it Divines if you can. You want Divines on everything. The reason you want Divines on everything is if you gold it all out, that will put you exactly on 60.1% crit, and you're good. Anything under that will put you slightly under. Now, this is very important. This staff here needs to be this particular one. Now, you can get a regular Spider Cultist staff if you want in Sharpened. Absolutely fine. But that's going to be quite hard to find. This is the easiest one to get. Now, I'm not going to say it drops every single time, because it doesn't. But if you kill the boss in Fungal Grotto 2, on normal or veteran, this is the boss's weapon. It's important because that only drops from her, and it always drops in Sharpened. If this particular named weapon drops, it will guaranteed be in Sharpened. That's just how it's made. So that's the easiest way to get the perfect weapon for that setup. Also on the back bar, I am using a Maelstrom Lightning Staff. The one I'm using is precise, however, optimal, you want to get charged. I'm not lucky enough to get it yet. Tried it loads and loads of times on PTS, and of course done a lot of testing with other people as well, and a few other crafted bits and pieces, and charged is really, really strong because it boosts the extra chance to create off balance while you're throwing down your dots and switching bars. Very, very good. Although you can use anything you like, but make sure it's a Maelstrom one if you can get it. If you don't have one, don't panic. You can run this build without the Maelstrom weapon, and you can actually farm the Maelstrom without it in order to acquire it. Now, the other choice you have, there's one more choice, and that is you can swap out the Spider Cultist. By the way, I did test Infused, and it didn't come out on top at all. In fact, I didn't like it. It gave us a decent amount of damage. It wasn't bad. It was very, very good, in fact. But it was so close. I'm sticking with what I've got. Prefer this one. This was slightly higher, based on this particular setup anyway. However, this is your other option. You can drop the 5 Spider Cultist, and you can go 5 Ether. Infallible Ether. Now, there's 2 ways to get your staff. You can either get the Infallible Ether sharpened, which I know is a pain in the ass, or you can get Netch's Touch and sharpened, which again is also a pain in the ass. But whichever one you get can go in place of this staff, and then you just juggle your gear around so it fits. Now, the reason you can have 5 Ether is because you get spell crit, just the same as our other set, spell damage, same as our other set, minus Slayer instead of max magic, which will give us a 5% overall damage, and the end tick on your heavy attacks does an extra 903 damage. That doesn't splash, by the way. It's a single target. Then ignore the minor vulnerability, that comes with lightning concussion effects anyway, but you do get an additional crit bonus. You'll see at the top there's a crit bonus, and on the 5th piece there's a crit bonus. So basically, for slotting this, you get minus Slayer instead of max magic, and instead of 440 destro damage, and you also get an extra crit. So that will push you to 64% just. Now, the problem here is I did test them both. It's entirely up to you if you find this more comfortable because of the crit bonus, but the minus Slayer is not actually any better than the 440 spell damage on your destro damage. Because although this does 5% across the board, where are we going? Here, we'll put the buffs on. 440 spell damage to your destro abilities, including your heavy attacks, which is crucial. Look at the 2.8k spell damage. 440 is much more than 5%. You'll lose 1k max magic and gain 5% overall on your damage. It's very close. Very close. In fact, it was slightly less on some of the tests, but off balance can fluctuate, so who knows. But it's entirely up to you. That's your choices. Netch and Spider and Kina, or Netch and Infallible and Kina. Choices are yours. Depends on what content you do, and depends which one you're more comfortable with overall. But they're both almost identical in damage. Personal preference though, I prefer Spider Cultist, not just because it's a lot easier to get, but because I kind of seen slightly smaller increase on results. But that's your choice. Champion points. This is important. Ironclad, 9 times out of 10 the tank drops the boss and you have to block, so you don't want to get killed by a heavy attack. Shield up and block, and then this will buffer some of your resist towards a single hit attack. 51 in thick skin, so you hit 19%, lovely there. 75 into hardy, so you take a lot less poison, disease, physical damage, that kind of stuff. You bang on the jump point there. And the same for this as well. Reduces your damage taken from flame, frost, shock and magicka, hitting the 13% jump point there for 65 points. 11 in here, 10 essentially, so you can get this passive, so you can res people and take less damage. You can actually use that as a buff in some situations. And the extra 1 point is just to push that jump point over the edge, so we actually get the 3% increase healing received. 34 into Warlord, you will have to break out stuns and stuff, so it helps to have a reduction to cost there. 75 into Arcanist, 75 points in here gives you 14%. 100 points gives you 15%. Don't waste those 25 points, it's only 1%, it's not worth it, you can put them elsewhere. 75 into Tenacity, we heavy attack all the time, so our sustain is awesome. Again, don't put the extra 1% into here, it costs you 25 points, it's wasted. Keep to 14, you're good. This one here, Tumbling, 14.14% in dodge roll reduction to cost, and the last 2 points go in here to give you 1% reduction to block cost. This is just because if I put them in here, they're going to do nothing. They don't hit a jump point, they just sit there drifting in the middle doing nothing at all. So I put them into here, so we've got at least 1% into something. Now, 31 into Elfborn, increasing our critical damage by 13%. Increases our magic, shock, flame, frost damage by, what we got, 12% there, but 56 points into there. 25 into Spell Erosion, which is actually really good. In fact, we can probably drop that a bit, but I'll get to that in a moment. 33 points into Staff Expert to give us more heavy and light attack damage. And 75 into Thermaturge to give us the Exploiter passive. I told you that heavy attacks are increased when stuff is off balance by 70%. This increases all of your damage, including that 70%, by a further 10. So this is very important overall, but your heavy attacks are very important as well. Now this here, This is where people get really confused, and the drop in sharpened, most people are like, oh my god, sharpened's useless. We're actually been over penetrating a lot in the past for no good reason, and this is where it comes in. If you look here, light armor, 4884 penetration, standard. Then we take, where is it, 10%, we go straight through 10% of the target's spell resistance. Most PvE stuff has 18.2, so this is 1.8k already reduction as far as penetration is concerned. So we're hitting almost 6k already with the two bonuses combined, maybe 5.5, whatever you want to call it. Then we go into this skill here, which would be on the tank usually, not necessarily this particular skill, but this buff at least. Major breach, 5.2k there. So we're well over 11k already, not far off 12. Then if you look at the sharpened weapon, nearly 3k there, so we're pushing 15, not far off of that. We'll say 14 for argument's sake. And then you look into the champion points, and we're getting further 2.5 almost k here. If we estimate, we're hitting around 16k penetration before any buffs are applied, well, including the taunt. So if someone pops Alkosh or a slightly buffed Crusher, we're at cap. So if you find that your trial group, for example, or your dungeon group are optimized to the point where you can really tweak your spell penetration, you probably won't need this at the time. So take it out of here, put it into extra crit damage, you'll be absolutely fine. Failing that, if you solo a lot, do a lot of pug groups or just casual playing, keep it in here, you'll have a really good buffer to your spell penetration, and if anyone does come with a shiny buff into the group, you're going to hit cap. You'll be good. So sharpen for this particular build, as people worried that it wasn't going to be here, it is here for a very good reason. Now what I'll do is, obviously on the screen I'll show you exactly what you are getting. You can see it there. But we are in a very, very safe place. Now, I need to show you how this works. Now, the rotation is very, very simple. All you need to do is keep your buffs up. Start with this, Boundless Storms, and put your Power Surge on as well. That's what you need to do before every fight. Make sure it's on. It's very, very simple to do. And I'll do this with the buffs intact, actually. Liquid Lightning, Light Attack, Boundless Storms, Light Attack, Wall of Elements, swap. 3 heavy attacks. Very simple. Destructive Clench, switch. Liquid Lightning, Light Attack, Power Surge this time. Light Attack, Wall of Elements, swap. 3 heavies again. Destructive Clench, switch. Liquid Lightning, and we're back to start 1. Boundless, Wall of Elements. So every back bar rotation, one of them is Liquid Lightning, Light Attack, Boundless, Light Attack, Wall of Elements, swap. When you go back there again after your 3 heavies and Destructive Clench, you do exactly the same. Instead of Boundless this time, you press Power Surge. So every single rotation, one is one buff, next rotation is the next one, and just keep that up consistently. You don't have to stop it, you don't have to mess with it at all, and your sustain will be nuts. Also, take into account the Destro skills mean that if you kill stuff with your Destro stuff, you get even more magicka back. It's in the passives. Now, I'm going to give you a quick demonstration as to how this works inside a situation where you're going to have lots and lots of AoE. Okay, fast tracking a little bit, halfway through Darkshade Caverns, I'm going to show you what happens when you bunch up a shit ton of enemies. Take into account, of course, your off-balance procs will be a lot more if you have someone in the group similar or the same as you. Now, like I said on the skeleton, it's a terrible test for this kind of setup. The skeleton wasn't made so that every single thing you ever do in the game, including the stuff they change, will mean that you get flat numbers on the skeleton. It's good for practice, but there are variables that apply to not all builds. This one in particular relies heavily on off-balance. You could get it 10% of the time on your own, you could get it 50% on the time on your own. Whichever one of the two variables you get drastically overall changes how much DPS you actually put out. Because our main source of damage, alongside all of our lightning damage of course, is that we get 70% extra damage from our heavies. Now of course, if you're in a group situation and there's plenty of this going on, the status effects are going to be much more, and the uptime on off balance, instead of being 10 to 50%, is going to be more like 70 to 100%, maybe even 90% on average. So you can see why the DPS will increase a lot more if you have support. And that's without including any external buffs from anybody else. No warhorns, spell power cures, none of that kind of stuff. Just an additional one of these. That's it. So it's no good testing it solo and expecting it to be over the top, because one time it might be and another time it might not. But this is all how it works. So I'm going to piss these off real quick. Try not to die. Keep shields and buffs up. This is probably going to hurt. There's a boss there. Hit her with that twice then for no reason. Piece of cake. What'd I get? Invigorating. The new trait. So that's an example of how much AoE and single target you can put out solo. I mean, she didn't get too many off balance procs there, so it was a bit poor, but it can happen. It can go in your favor or it cannot. It's just how it works. But sustain's fine. You can shield like hell without really struggling. And of course, I didn't really show you, but I normally use stamina pots, because when I'm in a situation like that and I have to bash or block, I can keep my shield up and do so quite a lot. Now, I'm going to show you a quick example of the Veteran Maelstrom Arena. Because a lot of people are scared of it. Of course, you don't have to have the Maelstrom weapon to get in there. In fact, you can farm the weapon with this setup with just a regular crafted staff on the back. But I'm going to show you how you apply your damage. You don't have to do full rotations in there, except for when you're on a boss maybe. So let's go and have a look at that. And I'll show you the first round, just how to apply your damage and keep up your sustain and survivability at the same time. It works the same way throughout the entire dungeon. Also, don't forget Destructive Clench that I'm using there. You don't actually have to have that. You can change it for Crush and Shock if you prefer, for Interrupt. It's up to you. You don't have to use both of those dots there. You can literally just use the one. You can use Wall of Elements and that's it. And just heavy attack him. Dead. My buffs are off, but don't worry. Stage off. I'm gonna feel so sorry for. Good night. Simple as that. Now, I know it takes practice to know where all the spawns are and all that kind of stuff, but one dot on the floor, heavy attack them, execute. Good night. Missed that one. Come here. Oh, you went straight into it. Whoops. Don't recast it. He's going to come into it anyway. That one isn't, because it ran out. But he's going to die. So he popped there. The execute was on him early. Then you push him past 20% and he's dead. Same goes for him. Stand pots or magic pots, entirely up to you. You don't really need them. I'm kind of overcasting some of my abilities. But if you're really not that comfortable, you can take tripods instead, keep your health up a bit. You'll notice that I'm healing like hell because I'm using crit surge all the time, or power surge, sorry, as it's called. Help if it crit. Block him. Boss time. Not a very good example. You can kill him on the first part, but I didn't. But you get the idea. Very, very simple. Keep your heavy attacks going, keep your wall of elements down. Make sure if you fire off a full heavy, you pop a shield at the end if you need to. Don't cancel your heavies too much because you'll struggle and sustain. You've got to finish those heavy attacks. Okay, so hopefully that helped. Hopefully that wasn't too boring. I know it's long, but I want to explain everything as much as possible because there is usually a lot of questions and most people do not understand how this kind of build works. I know a lot of people want to smack this over and over and over while screaming Ellie Drain and magicka balls and all these different types of ways to rig a skeleton DPS test, whatever you want to call it, whether it's help or just making it look better. I don't really care. The skeleton doesn't apply to everything. Here's an example. Stunned, yes, nice. No off balance. So let's put nothing. Let's try again. Nope, not happening. Oh look, we got it. Now that will increase your damage a lot. A hell of a lot. But does it happen all the time on the skeleton? Nope, no it doesn't. So that variable alone decreases your damage while testing it against that puppet. They're good to practice on. That's what they're for. It's not a competition of who gets the highest numbers. It's a fact of can you sustain, can you dish out the damage, and can you stay alive? Yes, you can do all of them. And here are we? Let's go in here somewhere. Is it doable for content? You want confirmation, of course, because people do complain a lot about whether you can or can't do this. Specifically elitist types, which are really annoying. Yes, capable of hard mode VMOR. No trouble. Because, believe it or not, regardless of what that skeleton says, this can survive and do a shit ton of damage. And anyone can use it. That's the most frustrating thing for a lot of elitists out there. They want people to have top-end trial stuff and all these stupid, complicated mechanics and rotations and everything like that. This is very, very simple, and all the hard work is done for you. So, hopefully that helps. Hopefully I didn't piss too many people off by giving you something that's very easy to use. Thank you very much for everyone who's been supporting the channel so far. If you're not subscribed, then please do hit that button. It is free. Furthermore, if you want to help support the channel outside of YouTube, there are links in the description for the Patreon page, the Twitter page, the Facebook page, and of course the website, XynodeGaming.com. If you have any questions, please put them in the comment section below. I do normally answer everyone on there as long as I see it. Sometimes, especially now I'm almost on 7k subs, some of them disappear and they don't come through on notifications, but I'll keep my eyes open and I'll answer as many as I can. Once again, thank you all very, very much for watching. Have fun with the build and goodbye.